In true crime, we often look at narcissists who believe they have the right to do anything they like and get away with it. Sometimes we look at people who are deluded to the point that no one sees them as they see themselves. In 2009 and 2010, there was a man who liked to do things for shock value because he wanted recognition. But he also did evil things because he enjoyed them. This is Murder of Crows. Stephen Sean Griffiths was born December the 24th, 1969 in Dewsbury, Yorkshire, to a frozen food salesman, also called Stephen Griffiths, and a telephone operator who was named Moira Dewhurst. Little is documented about his earliest years, other than he was apparently a very shy young boy. But what we do know about his teenage years and adolescence makes him the very poster child for psychopathy in development. His parents separated when he was 9 and later divorced when he was 13. And his mother was apparently very unstable and promiscuous, with Griffiths often witnessing men come and go from the home, and on at least one occasion he saw his mother have sex with multiple men in the garden. Classy. This apparent neediness and desire to please partners by his mother would have had numerous effects on Griffiths. While the divorce actually happened when he was 13, one imagines that the kind of instability his mother was displaying would have had some degree of history within the household, to the point where Griffiths would likely have had little attention from his mother because her focus would have been elsewhere, which of course would have led to an unstable attachment and also lack of trust and a lack of boundaries, which would only have worsened after the divorce, one imagines. Now, his mother was also rumoured to be a sex worker and also a con artist, which would only have compounded his take what you can get ethics. Perhaps trying to make up for his ex-wife's shortcomings as a mother, Griffith's father pulled the money together to send Griffiths to public school, which for anyone not in the UK is rather posh. Queen Elizabeth Grammar School in Wakefield. But this would turn out to be a colossal waste of money due to Griffiths' poor attitude and his apparent belief that he already knew what the staff were trying to teach him. This smug smarminess alienated him from his peers. I mean, come on, who wouldn't be alienated by that? And Karma, being the schadenfreude-loving bitch that she is, saw him fail his A-levels. In the US, this would be roughly equivalent to the advanced placement examinations. To my mind, one of the most notable things during this time that would have got Griffiths' cogs moving in aberrant directions was him finding out that there was an infamous alumnus that attended the same school that he did. And that was the acid bath murderer, John George Haigh. We will learn that Griffiths became obsessed with serial killers as he was getting older, but I wonder if this revelation might be what sparked this particularly dark and malevolent seed within him. Through his upbringing, his mother had only instilled within Griffiths a lack of boundaries, as well as, it seems, a seething contempt for her, and very possibly, by extension, women in general. And it was the lack of boundaries that would bring Griffiths his first serious brush with the law when he was 17. Though, to no one's surprise, it is said that he would steal from shops and classmates alike before this. The incident in question was a byproduct of one of his shoplifting efforts, where when seen and challenged attempting to steal from a store, Griffiths slashed the face and neck of the attendant, who fortunately survived. Due to his age, Griffiths was sentenced to 3 years, but in youth custody, which is still no picnic anyway. But if his actions were not enough of a warning about Griffiths' damaged psyche, then his behaviour while serving his time should have red flag central in terms of his possible danger to other people in the future. Because while he was in detention, he stated to both guards and therapists that he fantasized about being a serial killer. Hello, Dr. Steve to authorities. Something feels a little off with this one. You would think that this would have been a hint to authorities to maybe keep an eye on him, put his name on a list somewhere. But following his release, he was let out with only limited supervision. Genius, right there. The next major portent of future atrocities came in 1989, when Griffiths would have been 19, where he was sentenced to 100 hours of community service for carrying an air pistol, which he would use to shoot birds that he would later dissect. McDonald triad. I think at this point, police, probation, and every other service in his vicinity should have invested in some nice shiny highlighter pens, taken out his by now sizable file, and written in pretty big letters, "Fucking dangerous," on the front of it. But anyway, in 1991 he was diagnosed as a schizoid psychopath. Do you think? And in 1992 he was again jailed for 2 years for holding a knife to the throat of a young girl. Jeebers, this dude really does tick all the boxes, doesn't he? Whew. Anywho, after serving his time, Griffiths then throws himself into education and research of bloody serial killers. He built up a library of books on serial killers. Now, if you have books on killers, fear not, unless you hit all of the McDonald triad and are a narcissistic psychopath with a god complex and a poor me mentality. And these books included his school's infamous pupil, John George Haigh, along with others including the Moors murderers and his personal favourite, Peter Sutcliffe. I'm sure if there were pullouts in magazines, he'd have been right up there on the wall. Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper. He tried to legitimise his fascination in the subject by completing a bachelor's degree in psychology at the University of Bradford, where he then enrolled as a PhD student, researching, I shit you not, the differences in methodology between 19th century murderers and contemporary murderers. Fuck me. Now you may think at this point, given his weirdness and contempt for anyone that is not him, that Griffiths was created in the incel mould. But he did have girlfriends. They just generally didn't hang around for long. Let me give you an example with the story of one particular poor young lady. She met Griffiths through a Lonely Hearts column. Lonely Hearts. Lonely? Probably. But I profoundly doubt that he had, or indeed has, a heart. By the by. Anyway, she describes a man who was charming and funny, but generally creepy. And the understatement of the year award goes to... Right, so he was obsessed with horror films. Nothing wrong with that. But he found them funny rather than scary. He needed to block his ears with cotton wool at night, lest an insect burrow into his brain. One night, when he didn't have cotton wool for whatever reason, he could not sleep. So instead, as you do, sat in a chair and watched his girlfriend sleep all night. After being together for several weeks, the unfortunate young lady still had not seen Griffiths' flat. So when he did eventually invite her around, and she did see it, it would be safe to say that she was aghast. What she saw was a flat with an inundation of horror films and books about serial killers. Much of the room was covered in clear plastic, and the walls were adorned with weapons, including samurai swords and crossbows. It's like Griffiths wanted to be the secret love child of Dexter and Buffalo Bill. Somewhat unsurprisingly, the poor young lady broke things off with Griffiths shortly thereafter. Wonder why? But around this time, Griffiths was showing other affectations, like adopting a goth style of dressing, along with strange behaviours like starting a collection of reptiles, including a 4-foot monitor lizard that he used to take on walks on a dog leash. He would feed live rats to the reptiles, and it was reported that Griffiths used to eat the live baby rats whole. But far from being impressed by his edgy, dark behaviour, people just found him odd, strange, without making any great impact on people. I can't help feeling that everything Griffiths was doing and the demeanour that he was projecting to the world was all for show, and he wanted the world to bow down to his bleak magnificence. But I think it was a lack of authenticness, and the incongruence of these behaviours meant that rather than a prince of darkness, he just ended up coming across as an odd bod, and this lack of recognition would have just fueled his rage at the unfairness of a world that cannot accept his greatness. Now at this point, Griffiths is approaching 40, and it seems much of the darkness had remained in his head, though it does diffuse into the online world, as Griffiths develops a liking for violent pornography. And to get further insight into Griffiths' escalating contempt for society at large, we have to look at MySpace and Griffiths' alter ego, then pariah. Now it seems Ven is drawn from shortening his name, while pariah simply means an outcast. Put them together and what do you get? Obviously what you get is a pretentious crap burger of a name for Griffiths to hide behind online. Now, back in the dim and distant days of the internet, MySpace, young people, ask your parents, Ven Pariah's homepage was adorned with images of killers, terrorists and Nazis. Again, all to try to convince the world that he was someone to be feared and in awe of. He would post pretentious verses and writings, all of which were ripped off from films like Pulp Fiction and especially from the book Red Dragon, which was the prequel to Silence of the Lambs. He really was a sheep in wolf's clothing and hating the world for not granting him his rightful place in it. Now, having studied his favourite serial killer, Peter Sutcliffe, at length, I suspect his decision to live and study in Bradford was no coincidence. Because Sutcliffe was known to use Bradford as one of his hunting grounds. During his time there, in the lead up to the killings, I suspect that he was laying groundwork for what was to follow by befriending many of the sex workers that worked in the red light district. Now, to my mind, there are several layers to the choices and his behaviours around this. Firstly, he clearly wanted to emulate his hero, the Yorkshire Ripper, who himself targeted sex workers. From his own academic research into murder, Griffiths would have appreciated that sex workers were an easy target due to the high-risk lifestyle, the increased vulnerability, and a willingness to go with strangers. And his behaviour in becoming friendly with the ladies was to reduce any level of threat the women would feel around him, becoming just Stephen instead of that creepy murdery bastard. The first known murder took place on or around 22nd of June 2009. After that date, 43-year-old mother and grandmother Susan Rushworth was not seen or heard from again. Susan, who went by Susie, had fallen into hard drug use and would use sex work to fund her heroin addiction, thereby increasing her vulnerability still further. Now, it is believed that Griffiths invited Susie to his flat, where he killed her with a hammer, perhaps another nod to Peter Sutcliffe there, and dismembered her body in his bathroom. He is never disclosed where the majority of her remains were deposited, but the boots that he was wearing when he was arrested down the road about a year later were shown to contain traces of Susie's blood some 11 months after her disappearance, and blood traces from Susie were also found in Griffiths' bathroom. On April the 26th, 2010, 31-year-old Shelley Armitage disappeared. She was also a sex worker looking to fund a drug addiction. After the fact, a former school friend described her as popular and really pretty, but addiction had dragged her into a vulnerable lifestyle that Griffiths preyed upon. Some of Shelley's remains were later found in the River Aire. There have been claims that Griffiths ate some of the remains of each of his victims, but as far as I am aware, this has never been officially corroborated other than by Griffiths' own words alone. So it may be a case of him saying this for effect, but it's likely that we will never know for certain. Now, around this time, the owners of Griffiths' apartment block were dealing with a whole raft of complaints about Griffiths, and they felt uneasy about his continued tenancy, but had no firm evidence upon which they could serve an eviction notice. Numerous of the other tenants within the building had moved out, citing Griffiths and his strange behaviours as the cause. In fact, so troubled were the owners that they installed a CCTV system, with the main purpose of installing this system being able to keep an eye on Griffiths. Now, this would turn out to be a wise move, and in the fullness of time almost certainly saved lives going forward. The camera system would provide shocking and incontrovertible evidence of Griffiths' guilt, certainly in the case of his final victim. Griffiths' final confirmed victim was 36-year-old Susan Blamires, who fit the victim profile by being a sex worker with addiction difficulties. But Griffiths' modus operandi differs here, as he held Suzanne hostage for 2 days before her murder. While this may have been about control for Griffiths, who was obviously evolving his methods as a killer, but it was also ultimately his undoing. But unfortunately, not soon enough for Suzanne. Having held her hostage for 2 days, she managed to get free and raced into the corridor outside the flat in an effort to escape. Griffiths calmly and callously marched after her and shot her in the corridor with a crossbow bolt before dragging her back into the flat, where it seems she was also stabbed in the head. And of course, famously, he also took the opportunity to flip the bird to the CCTV cameras in a show of arrogance. Most of this was captured on the CCTV in horrifying detail. But in an unfortunate twist, the footage was not discovered until the caretaker of the property reviewed the camera footage on returning to work after the weekend. He immediately alerted the authorities, but by then Suzanne had been dismembered and dumped into the River Aire. But the footage unquestionably saved lives, as he was arrested on the 24th of May 2010.
This gentleman's been arrested on suspicion of assault, his arrest message from the trial, effective information about question, answers that need to be cleared first.
Right, okay. I'm authorising you to do this at the police station because there's an allegation that you've assaulted somebody, so you're going to be interviewed about that matter. Do you understand that? Yeah, okay. Is it still handcuffed?
He is still handcuffed.
Yeah. Are you alright for us to take handcuffs off?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that's fine.
Into the water.
We'll sort that out for you in a minute.
Stephen,
Yeah.
you further arrested on suspicion of murder of Susan Blurman between Friday the 21st and today.
Okay.
You want to say anything? How many difference? You mentioned the question such a which way to line, if got anything you do say, maybe give me an evidence.
So do you understand what the officer just said about that? Yeah, right, okay, so it was something else that you've ever been interviewed about, alright? So I'm authorising you to do something else on that as well.
Stephen, if you just take back proper counsel, just behind this white line for us, just keep your hands down by your side.
What's your surname, please? Griffiths.
Yeah.
How was that?
Upon appearing in the magistrate's court following his arrest, he again famously gave his name as the Crossbow Cannibal. What a dickhead. Even his capture and arrest could not stop his attention-seeking behaviour. I mean, Crossbow Cannibal, seriously, what a douche. In the trial that followed, he was sentenced to a whole life order, meaning he will never be eligible for release from prison and will thankfully die behind bars. There are a number of other murders that have been linked to Griffiths, most of which unsuccessfully. 19-year-old sex worker Rebecca Hall was murdered back in 2001 and is the most likely candidate for having been killed by Griffiths. But the three murders I've documented are those that he was ultimately convicted of. In footage from his questioning after his arrest, Griffiths describes himself as misanthropic, which is possibly the only time in his miserable life when he has described himself accurately.
What were you setting things on fire for?
Well, to destroy DNA, but like I say, in such a reckless, crazy manner. I can't believe, mind you, I don't know, I think, like I said, caretaker perhaps had other things on his mind, but otherwise I can't believe, you know, with the smoke that must have been billowing out of the windows. Although I did keep them shut for a while as well, so that's why I got a lot of soot all over me, and eventually I got a breathing mask on. But
So, how would you know that the fire destroys DNA?
well, to be perfectly honest, I mean, that was something I always kept meaning to check up on the internet, but it was just an assumption that, well, certainly I think the principle I operated on was, well, it certainly isn't going to enhance the quality of the evidence.
And what sort of location have you put them in? If you can't tell us where, what sort of location have you put them?
I don't know, where a robot, where a computer would put it. You know, a rational, emotionless aberration would put it.
Why did you feel the need to kill her?
I don't know. I don't know if I was, so just sometimes you kill someone to kill yourself or kill part of yourself. I don't know. That's like deep issues inside me.
So why did you feel the need to kill any of the girls? Fun?
I don't know. Well, I'm misanthropic. I don't have much time for the human race.
While he was a narcissist with delusions of grandeur, he was unquestionably also a dangerous psychopath with a deep-seated hatred for women, sex workers in particular. The world is a safer place with him locked up, and we can only mourn the poor women who crossed his path only to meet a tragic end. This video is dedicated to Susie, to Shelley, and to Suzanne, and to their family and friends. Thank you for watching another episode of Murder of Crows. I'm Steve, and I'll see you when I see you.